What's good, YouTube? It's your boy here, First Time Colorado, coming at you with another video. It's December in Colorado. There's mountains, there's snow up in those mountains. So we are going to be waxing our boards, getting ready to crush that gnar. So today's video is going to be about how to properly wax and tune your board. Now before we get started, we had a couple new subscribers lately, so I just want to throw a quick shout out. The Honda CR500, I see you. I see you, Ollie G. I see you, JR Music. Appreciate you guys jumping on. Thanks so much for subscribing. Hopefully we can get a few more subscriptions to this basic AF channel. But thanks again. And so today's video, we're gonna get right into it. This is properly tuning up your snowboard. Pretty much the same routine for skis, except for you just got two goofy things and you gotta do it twice. Just kidding. I know a lot of skiers out there. As long as you're having fun out there on the mountains, this is a great thing for you to do. Beginning of the season, it's always good to check all of your equipment. So here are some of the tools that you're gonna need to properly tune and wax your board. So obviously you're gonna need an iron. This is just a basic, regular, cheap iron that you can buy at like Target or Walmart, something like that. Now a real ski or snowboard iron won't have these holes in here. And they're gonna be a little bit smaller as well. But if you just are looking for an inexpensive way to do all this, it can absolutely be done with just a regular basic iron. Just make sure that you never use that iron again for anything other than the snowboard wax. Essentially, it's pretty much ruined other than for snowboard wax, so just keep that in mind. You're also gonna need wax. They make all types of different wax, warm weather wax, cold weather wax, all-purpose wax, or all-weather wax. Unless you're waxing your board frequently and often, really the white wax is the way to go. That's gonna be the all-weather, so just remember, it's all right if it's all white, all right? So with the white wax, if you're not riding too often, I only wax my board probably every like 4 or 5, 6 times, depending on how hard I'm riding, or if I know that there's a big dump coming, a big storm coming. There's going to be a lot of pow, I'll definitely wax before going on any trip like that. So the other thing that you're going to need, you're going to need scrapers. You really just need one, but you'll see if you do a lot of scraping, they get dull after a time, so you'll end up purchasing new ones over and over. You're also going to need a cork. This is a little mini baby cork. I would definitely recommend getting a bigger one than this, but you definitely are going to need a cork. Some Brillo pads are going to work. So you want to try to pick up some good Brillo pads. These also wear down after so long, so you will need to replace these every so often. You can do plenty of wax jobs with that, but once you see all the wax start to build up and you're not really getting that rough Brillo action, that'll be the time to remove those. And then I also like to have just a nice little rag around as well. And then some extra tools that you might need. You're definitely going to want your screwdriver or your tools, so that way you can screw in your bindings, make sure that those are all tight and good to go. This is an edger. You might see just something like this with the file. They might be a lot bit bigger, but now they kind of make these nice with the handles, so you can just kind of grind those up and down the edge. I'll show you how those work. And this guy, I should probably know what it's called, but I don't. But this is really just for scuffing out any scratches or sharp edges that you have on the edges there. So honestly, you're probably not going to use this too often unless you're riding really hard. And same with this right here. These usually come in long sticks. This is P-Tex. Whenever you ride and you grind the wax down to the core, you get a core shot in your board. You actually burn these and drip these down into that core shot, and that'll help make that board ride smooth and stuff like that again. I don't really ride as hard as I used to, so it's been a while since I've had to use any P-Tex or anything like that. So we're just going to go through these steps. I'm just going to wax a couple boards because it's the beginning of the season. Alright, as I was cleaning everything off, I noticed I had this up there, didn't say anything about it. If you get a kit, like a waxing kit, you might see one of these metal brushes in there. What this is for really is if you take all of the wax off your board and get down to the base, then you can actually use this just to rub like a line just from the straight down the board. You want to go the direction that the board's going to ride in the snow, and that way you can put these little grooves in. Obviously they're not going to be very deep or anything like that, but you're going to get these like little grooves that are going to go into the base, and then that'll actually help the wax cling to that a little bit better. Honestly, it's something that a lot of racers and things like that will do. They might even put like a gap in the middle of their like a little wax line down their board. I'm not a racer or anything like that, so it's not something that I use, but if you see that, that's actually what that's for. Now, the first thing that I like to do at the beginning of the season is just check all my equipment. Just make sure, put my boots on, make sure the laces are good, that I'm not having any issues there, because it's been a good 6 months or so before I pulled any of this stuff out. So I also like to jump and step on my board, just make sure that the feet feel comfortable, just that everything feels right, or that feels good. If you like, then you can actually slide these in or slide these out, depending on how you ride. It's just however you're comfortable. I like to ride switch quite a bit, so I like to make my board the exact distance from the tail to the middle of this foot, and the nose to the middle of the front foot, and then I just go 12 negative 12, so that way my feet it feels exactly the same whether I'm riding switch or I'm riding goofy. So something that I like to do is just make sure that you go in here and just tighten all the screws. A lot of times over the season that they'll loosen down, so what you want to do is just make sure that they're all tight. Now, depending on your bindings, some of the newer bindings might have a cover over these screws, so just make sure they usually have some place that you can kind of snap those up or pull that cover off before you can actually get down there. But just if you open up your binding and you see that you don't have any screws down there, there are definitely screws down there. Just make sure that you lift that cover up so you can put those in. Now, when you're using an edger, just make sure that you use the edger the right way. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a little arrow right there pointing to the left. Actually, I'm sorry, it's pointing to the right. It's actually on both sides. So it's going to tell you which way that you want to use that to rub down the edge. So whether you have something like this or a hand tool like that, or whether you have a long big file that you're using, you just want to make sure, one, that you're using it the proper way, you're getting the right friction and the right rub, and you'll really feel it, because if it's catching right, you'll have a little resistance, whereas if it's not catching right, it's just going to slide real smooth. So definitely make sure that you're using that correctly. The edge is something that you don't really have to do too often, depending on how much you're riding or how hard you're riding, but in a proper tune, they will edge your board for you, or sharpen your edges for you. Another tip with the edger, when you're using this, you just want to make long strokes with that. You don't want to, kind of jerk that down like that. So whether you're using a file or whether you have a tool like this, just make sure that you run it nice, long, and smooth all the way from the nose down to the tail. Again, you don't want to push it back and forth like that on the way down. Just nice, long strokes. You really only need to do it a couple times. Once you got the edges done, and actually I wouldn't edge it like I did it there. I was just doing that so you guys could see on the video. The easiest way to actually do it is just to set the board down on its nose or on its tail, and then hold it here and just stroke it straight down. That's going to be a lot easier than the way I showed you. So that's just a quick tip for you guys there. And then also, once you have that done, go ahead and plug in your iron. I like to start mine on the max setting just to burn out any old wax that I might have in there. But I actually do it at just the the second to the highest setting. I think it's like the cotton setting, which if you have a real waxing iron, you won't have those dials and things like that. But also I like to have a little rag before I actually throw the wax on. I actually just rub this down, make sure that if there's any excess dirt or like little pebbles or rocks in there, that you get those all out. And then the next step is actually dropping the wax. You want to get a nice layer of wax across the entire board evenly, but you don't want to throw too much wax on there, because essentially we're going to scrape all the wax off, so we don't want to put that extra work for ourselves. So the easiest way that I like to do it, I don't think there's really any right or wrong way, but I just start on one end. You start to burn, you can see that kind of dripping down. I just weave my way down the board and just kind of let it drip. And you can just see it's just watch your fingers and make sure that you're not going to get close to burning your fingers or anything like that. But pretty simple. Just drop some wax down, and then I also like to just go one time down the edges. Not that I'm a heel rider or edge rider or anything like that, but those are always just the most common places that the board is going to drop wax out or rub through the wax. Now, this board is definitely needs shot of wax. You can see all this white that's in here. So this is Buddy's board. I'm just helping him out. But same thing, you just want to make sure that you drip a nice layer of wax down. That done, next thing to do is actually just iron this wax down. So you're just gonna go in small circles. You can actually see it melt right under the iron. And you'll see it kind of just turn to liquid, and then you can see it actually kind of wax back out again. So what you want to do is just spread this wax, melt it and try to spread it with the iron as evenly as you can and across the entire board. and make sure that you get the edges. A lot of times you'll leave yourself like little holes where it looks like it's everywhere, but you might have like a little gap where no wax actually took place. And then also just go smooth and a couple times over where the screws of the bindings are. It's going to be really easy to feel where those are at because it won't melt quite the same because it's not as flat. If those screws are actually pulling that core away from the base just a little bit, so you'll actually see that there's just like a little bit of, it's not as smooth right there. So just go ahead and make sure that you get the whole board done. Once you got that wax spread out with the iron, melted and evenly spread out across the entire board, I like to leave the iron off to the side, just back on high, just let it burn off for about a minute or two, just kind of burn out any of that extra wax that's in there. But now comes the by far the toughest part, or the most effort that you're going to put in, and that's scraping off the wax. There's not really any good tips here other than just you know, lean into it and just scrape as much as you can. You don't have to, whatever works for you. Long strokes, small strokes, front to back, side to side. We're just gonna scrape as much of this wax off as we can. Now that we got a nice layer across the entire board, we just wanna scrape everything off and make it as smooth as possible, so that way you're just leaving yourself that real perfect thin layer of wax for riding on. Actually, I do have one tip for you. Use sharp scrapers. Don't let them dull down too long. If you've been using it for a while, don't just go ahead and replace these. They're not expensive at all. Just always make sure that you have a nice good edge that you can start pulling this wax off with. And then you just start scraping it down. And what you're gonna see is that you just literally pulling all this wax off the board that you just put on. You're just gonna pull that down and literally scrape all of that off. A good tip with waxing the board or scraping the boards is when you think you're about done, you're about halfway there, all right? So just scrub that down and make sure that you don't have any extra wax bumping out. Try to get it as smooth as you can, but remove as much wax as possible. Take your time scraping, make sure that you're real thorough. If you leave, the last steps really are just kind of the finer details now. So if you leave any kind of globs or bigger chunks of wax, you can actually feel that when you're riding. That little piece will be grabbing the snow like that. It won't be as smooth underneath you. So as you're carving or riding, like as you go over those little pieces of wax that you don't take off, you'll definitely feel it. So just make sure that you take your time, just go through everything, you know, over and over and over and over, and just make sure that you've got all the wax off. And then once you get to that step, the next thing you want to do is grab the Brillo pads, and what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of scrub everything in. So it's the wax on, wax off, breathe in, breathe out, always look the eye. Now we're going to go in with the Brillo pads. So this is not exactly sand the floor, but just make sure that you get all the wax that you just kind of scraped out, just go in circles and just buff it all the way around. So what you want to do is, you know, make sure you have a good Brillo pad here, and then you're just going to rub all this wax, and you're actually just moving that wax around. So where you're scraping it off, you're just kind of leveling the different edges or the different dynamics of the wax where the scraper would have been, or where it might just be, you know, it's microscopic, but there's like little crevices and things like that. So really, you're just going to go in here and buff all of that out. And again, these are like the last details, so make sure you take your time as you're doing this kind of stuff, because this is really, you know, where you're going to enjoy that nice new coat of wax. Now with the Brillo pad, you want to go in circles because you're trying to spread everything out as evenly as possible. Now with the last step is the cork. And what you want to do with the cork is you actually want to run the cork the direction of, you know, of how the snow is going to go on the board. So you just want to run it the long way. And what the cork's actually doing is just ever so slightly, that friction is melting that wax and just letting it get that final melt, and just kind of laying there nice and even as possible, nice and smooth. So make sure you put some pressure down on that. And you can buff it like this, but like, just make sure that you go in the direction that the snow is going to go down. So you just want to get a little pressure on there and just get that last nice melt. You can go a little slower with just a little more pressure. But either way, what you want to do is just make sure you touch the entire base of the board, and that way everything will be, it has that one nice layer that when your finished product is just going to be that perfect thin layer of absolute smooth glass-like wax. Using the cork, and it's easier for you to make kind of like these shorter strokes as you're melting this wax down, this final layer. You do want to do just one last of these long strips. Just make sure that you get the whole board the whole way. Just so any of these little places that you like made those little edges, you might have like just, like I said, it's microscopic, but they would be just a little uneven essentially. So just make sure that you run through and have that final press that goes all the way down. And when you're done with the cork, that's basically it. I like to get a like a microfiber towel or even a cotton towel will work. And then just kind of give it one last little buff just to make it nice and shiny. Try not to put any fingerprints on it until I get it up into the mountains. And this will be good depending on how much and how long that you ride, but like I said, I usually go you know, 3 to 5 times before I wax again, just depending on the conditions and how hard I'm riding and things like that, but I'm not a every time waxer. But hopefully that helps you guys out. Hopefully you're staying safe out there with all this crazy Rona going on. I will try to throw out just some of these random videos so we can have more content on the channel. But until we come out with some new videos, stay safe out there, keep turning those wrenches. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks guys.